They told us Antifa doesn't exist. For years, the legacy media, the Democrat Party, and every left-wing pundit with a microphone insisted that Antifa was just an idea, a boogeyman, a myth invented by conservatives to smear peaceful protesters. Joe Biden said it from the debate stage. MSNBC echoed it for years. And the corporate media looked the other way while black-clad militants blocked roads, stalked federal officers, and launched coordinated military-style operations against law enforcement in American cities. But this week, the Department of Justice walked into a federal courthouse in Minneapolis and proved every single one of them wrong. And the arrests have begun. Stick them to the very end of this video because I'm going to show you exactly who these people are, what they did, and why what is happening in Minnesota right now is not just a local story. It's just the beginning of the complete dismantling of the organized far-left terror network in America. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, helping you to make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. The feds have just dropped the hammer on 15 members of Antifa. The Department of Justice has charged members and associates of the group Direct Action Minnesota, or DAM, with various federal crimes, including conspiracy to impede a federal officer, multiple counts of interstate stalking, interstate threats, solicitation to commit a crime of violence, multiple counts of assault on a federal officer, and destruction of government property. Here's Homeland Security Special Agent Michael McCarthy.
Working closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office, our investigation uncovered extensive planning, material support, and coordinated attacks against federal personnel and facilities. Our teams have worked tirelessly, conducting surveillance, reviewing camera footage, and analyzing large volumes of information to identify those responsible. I want to thank all the agents and staff whose dedication and professionalism made these indictments possible. Our message is clear. You may not agree with the laws. You may protest the laws, but you must follow the laws or face the consequences. It is not optional. We will enforce the law. Any attempt to undermine it through violence or intimidation will be met with decisive action.
Now, DAM is an umbrella organization made up of multiple militant subgroups, including one called the Black Hat Workers Collective, a Minneapolis-based Antifa affinity group whose Facebook cover photo is the burning of the Minneapolis Police Department's 3rd precinct. These are not protesters. These are operators. And according to the 94-page federal indictment, DAM held regular planning meetings, practiced what they called operational security, or OPSEC, the same term used by military units, and deployed coordinated hard and soft blockade teams against federal law enforcement when ICE came out to Minneapolis. Their hard blockade teams used overturned vehicles, RV trailers, and blocks of ice hurled at law enforcement vehicles to physically obstruct the movement of federal agents. Their soft blockade teams used homemade shields reinforced with plastic and wood and metal to physically break through lines of officers on foot. And they didn't stop there. DAM members conducted what they called commuting tactics, identifying, surveilling, following, and confronting federal officers after work. One defendant, identified as Isaac Sant, who's seen here being arrested, actually followed federal officers from the Whipple Federal Building, the main hub for federal agencies just north of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, all the way across state lines to Hudson, Wisconsin, where he's finally stopped by local deputies. This was organized stalking of federal law enforcement officers in their homes, in their own neighborhoods. The communications that broke this case open were actually found in the group's own encrypted signal chats. Thousands of messages documenting the planning, the coordination, the assignments, all of it laid out in the defendant's own words. One defendant, Kyle Wagner, seen here, who openly identifies himself as Antifa and built an entire social media following around recruiting members, posted videos calling on his followers to get their guns and stop federal agents. He was charged not only with conspiracy, but with solicitation to commit a crime of violence and with making interstate threats that included explicit calls to kidnap and murder a federal officer. His words on video, apparently on Instagram. Other defendants were charged with assaulting federal officers. One involved ramming her car into an ICE agent during one of the blockade operations. Bottom line, these weren't protesters. These weren't demonstrators. This was an organized army, a literal army, organized, funded, trained, and operating on American soil against American law enforcement. Now, unfortunately, the 94-page indictment reveals that Dam's planning wasn't confined to a signal chat among a few anarchists. Federal prosecutors revealed that the organization coordinated directly with the Minnesota AFL-CIO, one of the largest and most powerful labor unions in the state, directing union members on where to position themselves for maximum operational effect against ICE. So we got a major American labor union being used as a force multiplier for a domestic terror operation. And then there's the money, the funding. These 15 defendants had thousands of dollars at their disposal to fund their operations: vehicles, equipment, shields, surveillance resources. The indictment doesn't yet tell us where all of it came from, but federal investigators are asking that exact question right now. And based on the pattern we saw in the Texas case, where organizations like the National Lawyers Guild, funded by George Soros' network through the Tides Foundation, were posting bonds for arrested Antifa members, I think we have a pretty good idea of where that trail is going to lead, and that's exactly who investigators are ready to bust next. First, gang, when the left talks about affordability, they never once mention how catastrophically costly the Biden era's regulatory avalanche was for ordinary American families. Because under Biden, between 400 and 800 new rules were forced onto hardworking Americans every single year, placing a $1.8 trillion burden on the backs of the people who build and sustain this economy. Now, thankfully, President Trump is changing all of that in a dramatic and historic way, slashing and cutting rules and regulations at an unprecedented rate. Earlier this month, in fact, the SEC officially eliminated something called the pattern day trader rule. So that's an old rule that forced ordinary people to have to keep up to $25,000 sitting in their account just for the privilege of day trading. And while liberals argue, well, this rule's there to protect less educated Americans, what it really did was protect the status quo by keeping the little guy out of the game entirely. But not anymore. By removing that arbitrary threshold, the Trump administration has effectively democratized the stock market for every American who ever wanted a seat at the table, which is exactly why I am so excited to tell you about my good friend Mark Wilburn of Neos Capital. He'll be hosting another free online training called the Freedom Trading Summit on June 25th and June 27th. Mark has been trading for nearly 20 years. His stock picks and training have helped listeners not only beat the market, but in some cases 2x or even 3x market returns. And the last time he hosted one of these events, we received so much incredible feedback that we asked him to do it again. Feedback from listeners like Bert, who after attending one of Mark's events went on to make nearly $25,000 on a $70,000 account in just 6 weeks and sent over his statements to prove it, showing exactly the kind of opportunities that exist right now in this new era we're living in. So if you're wondering how to position yourself to prosper in these times, go to freeturleyticket.com right now to reserve your spot with 2 live events to choose from: Thursday, June 25th, and Saturday morning, June 27th. Go to freeturleyticket.com and reserve your spot. You're going to absolutely love it. Now, as I alluded to, this is not the first case of Antifa members getting arrested and indicted. It just happened in Texas mere months ago. 5 members of a North Texas Antifa cell pleaded guilty to material support of terrorism in federal court for their attack on the Prairieland ICE detention facility last 4th of July. The first Antifa-related terrorism convictions in American history. And that conviction became what federal prosecutors call ground zero. the entry point through which the full investigative and surveillance architecture of the federal government can now trace the entire national Antifa network from the inside out. Once the conspiracy designation is in place, everyone in the network is potentially exposed. Everyone who provided money, everyone who provided lodging, everyone who coordinated online, everyone who shared information. You don't have to throw a single punch to be criminally liable for the conspiracy. The Minnesota indictment is round 2 of that same strategy, and the charges here are historic in their own right. This is the first time in American history that an organized Antifa conspiracy charge has been filed against a structured Antifa organization. Andy Ngo, who's been tracking Antifa for years, confirmed it. The charges of this nature at this level of organizational specificity simply have never been brought before. So we're seeing another level here. And the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota made something else very clear at the press conference this week. If you're actively conspiring to impede federal law enforcement right now, you should assume you're being watched. They're not done. 2 defendants are still at large, and prosecutors are already publicly predicting that Portland is next. Now, what's key to all of these investigations and indictments is that they're all part of President Trump's official designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. What we have to understand is that when he did that, he wasn't just making a political statement. He was actually unlocking the full arsenal of federal law enforcement, FISA warrants, Treasury Department asset tracking, NSA surveillance, and FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force operations. All of it now fully applicable to anyone associated with the network. And when you combine that terrorist designation with the ability to pursue RICO charges, the same legal framework used to dismantle the mob, you don't just get individual prosecutions. You get asset freezes before trial. You get the criminalization of financial support. You get liability that extends to every donor, every bail fund operator, every legal foundation that's been laundering activist money into Antifa's operations for years. Trump isn't just prosecuting rioters. He's dismantling the entire organizational and financial infrastructure of the American far-left terror network from the inside out, using the most powerful legal tools the federal government possesses. The Texas cell was the entry point. The Minnesota indictment is the expansion. And what's coming next is going to make both of them look like a warm-up act. So here's the bottom line. For decades, Antifa operated with total impunity. They burned federal buildings, they attacked law enforcement, they stalked officers in their homes, they coordinated with unions and they were funded by billionaire networks. And the previous administration, of course, looked the other way, or frankly, actively encouraged them. That era is over. 15 defendants are facing federal conspiracy charges in Minnesota right now as we speak. 2 are still on the run, and they know it. The funding networks are under scrutiny. Portland is next. Trump didn't just say he was going to crack down on political violence. Instead, he built the legal architecture to do it. He signed the executive orders. He stood up he's put together Joint Task Force Vanguard. He designated the organization, and now the convictions are coming, one cell at a time, until the entire network has been mapped, prosecuted, and dismantled. The days of Antifa operating as a shadow army of the American left are numbered. Justice isn't coming. Justice is already here.